So now, we're going to finish up the day talking about everybody's favorite topic, money. No, actually, angels, VCs, and one of the more interesting groups that's come up in the last couple of years is the Mid-Atlantic Bio-Angels. It's run by Yaniv Sneor, who's coming up right now, who's going to talk to you a little bit about his experience. So if we can cue up his deck. Are we okay, Donna? Donna? Okay, so, but I know Yaniv, so he can actually, there he goes. I was going to say freelance it, but freestyle, excuse me. Okay.
Sure. Hi, I know I have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try to make this quick. Hi, Judith. So my name is Yaniv Sneor, originally a physicist, but I'm reformed, I promise you. Not going to talk about that. For the last 25 years, I started, ran, turned around, sold, bought companies, all that kind of good stuff. And currently working both as a consultant and also one of the co-founders of Mid-Atlantic Bio-Angels. A little bit about our group. We were founded in 2012. We're New York-based. We meet monthly except the summer. Nothing ever happens in the summer. Remember that when you submit an application. We always pre-screen our deals. All of our investors are active, accredited, and it's basically invitation only. And we deal exclusively with life science. As opposed to many other angel groups around the world or the country, we have no geographic limitations, so we'll invest anywhere in the world. Just to give you some statistics about our group, of every 100 applications that are sent to us after pre-screening, only about 23% are invited to present to the group. Only about 12% of the 100 go to due diligence, and about 1 to 2% receive investment. That number is called yield, and on a comparison basis, when people raise money from friends and family, their yield is around 20%. So for the more sophisticated the investors, the more professional the investors, the lower the yield. Just it is what it is. So I wanted to give you a little bit of understanding of differentiation between VCs and angels. If there are any VCs in the room, I apologize in advance. Angels are individuals who are investing, who are accredited. VCs invest money of a fund. Usually that fund has a life of about 10 years, and that matters a lot to people raising money from the funds to understand where they are in that fund's life cycle. Angels invest their own money, whereas VCs invest other people's money, and it's their job to do so. Angels usually invest early stage, VCs usually invest later stage, and for angels, usually you can get in a round between $250,000 to $2 million is reasonable. VCs would prefer to invest more than $30 million. It's simply the fact that if you already put so much of that diligence work into it, you'll put the same diligence amount into a $1 million deal or a $30 million deal, but your 10x and a $30 million deal looks a lot bigger. So that's why usually, and again, some VCs invest earlier, but these are sort of somewhat standard. And in terms of angels, you can do multiple syndicated rounds between $15 and $20 million, but for VCs, they can definitely do more than $100 million as well. Here are some 2014 numbers, just to give you an idea in terms of numbers specifically. In 2014, 316,000 angel investors invested in opportunities, as opposed to 803 VCs. The angels funded about 20,000 life science companies, or about 73,000 companies in total, whereas VCs funded about 650 companies. So you're comparing 20,000 to 650, you're comparing 73,000 to 4,361. So just you see which universe you're dealing with depending on the kind of money you're going for. Angels put in of their own money $24 billion versus $49 million, more than twice of that by VCs. But I was surprised when I saw that number of $24 billion. That's quite a bit. Just to show you the breakup of those numbers, about 10.5% was in biotech, which is about $2.5 billion. About 17% of that was in services, devices, and equipment, about $4 billion or so. And I got the numbers for this from the National Venture Capital Association, and also there's a place called the Center for Venture Research, which keeps numbers on an annual basis about angel investing. Very good places to get information for you. So I was asked what makes startups attractive to investment, so I can tell you what makes it attractive to us. Strong management team. You've heard this before. Everybody, likes to bet on the jockey, not the horse. It's true. We like to give people to money that we think, that we trust, know what's happening in the road ahead, and can give us a return on our investment. We like to see a big, strong market need. We like you to have an unfair advantage, something that makes you unique and nobody else can copy you easily. Currently, the whole game in life sciences is you have to improve outcomes and reduce costs. And if you can do both of them, you're doing much better than the rest of the pack. We want it to be disruptive. We don't, as opposed to incremental, where it's just another thing or another thing in the chain. We'd like to see people actually change the way they do business, the way they practice medicine. That's what we're really looking for, change the standard of care. If you've had grants, non-dilutive funding, it makes our money go further. You'll see people argue credibly that when you do have grants, it can serve to defocus you sometimes because you have to go down a very specific path. But it very often can work synergistically well with the rest of the investments and your time. And we like to see you have a good board of directors or advisors, that you're not sort of out there alone in the woods. Somebody's out there looking for you and helping you out. A couple of other things. We like to see people who have a realistic expectation and understanding of the road ahead. It's very difficult to talk to people who are starry-eyed and are dreaming of wonderful things that are going to happen when they have no idea how to get there. Again, if you have strong supporters or endorsements from people within the industry, always very helpful. And very early alignment with customers. If you spoke to pharmaceutical companies or other device companies or whoever your ultimate customer or buyer is, and what you are giving them is actually what they want. I know it sounds simple, but a lot of people forget to ask customers what they actually want and what they're looking for, and how will what you are doing fit in with their scheme of things. Executive pay needs to be aligned with expectations of investors. We've seen companies that have been around for a very long time, and the executive pay is very high, and you get a feeling like all they're doing is raising money to pay themselves. And sometimes that happens. We want you to succeed. We want to be able to see that you can survive, but you only really succeed when everybody succeeds. A realistic valuation. Valuation is a very tricky thing when you're trying to figure out how much your company is worthwhile. It's more of an art than a science. But I urge you to spend a lot of time thinking about how you ultimately come up with that number. But if you're within realism, then there's something to talk. If you're in a different stratosphere, the discussions often don't even begin. And be honest, we do not know everything. If you ask the question and you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. And if you say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you in a week, get back in a week. It's very simple. Some of the things that make applications to us not attractive. If the management team is weak or not complete, or if we don't like them. If somebody presents to you and you just don't like them, imagine how much you're going to like them less when they have your money. Sometimes if an opportunity requires too much money, we say, no, it's a VC deal, it's not for us, because the dilution in future rounds is going to be too much for us. If the evaluation is unrealistic, we'll walk away. If we are not sure about the market need, if we don't think it's going to be big enough, or if you know what, I know there's a 1.3 billion people in China, but they're not all going to be buying your product. Lack of focus. Oh, we have a platform technology. We can do all of these things. If somebody comes to us and they're just too early, we call it a science experiment. We still have to decide what is our final product. We still have to figure out what is what is the molecule we have to decide we want to look at and experiment with. Science experiments we don't fund. A lot of times we see companies who are late arrivals in a crowded field. One of those fields, for instance, is wound healing. You know, there are so many companies going after the wound healing market. The amount of intellectual property you're going to be able to own is going to be very small. The difficulty in convincing the rest of the marketplace why you are different, it's very expensive and it's time consuming, doesn't make sense. Again, little differentiation. If there isn't much potential for exit, if it's a small market, or if we don't think that somebody's going to be buying you, or if there's only 3 potential acquirers, there isn't much chance for you to be acquired. It makes it for a more difficult opportunity. Long existence. We've seen companies that have been around for 10 years, really high salaries, but even without it, 10, 15 years, not much progress. Why should there be progress now that we invest in you? If it's a complicated, long approval process, it just adds even more uncertainty and more dollars and more time to the whole process. If you don't understand clearly who your beneficiaries are, we are in a really interesting market. The people who actually benefit from your science are not necessarily the people who pay for it or who influence the fact that it comes into the market. So you have to understand who actually benefits from it, who's paying for it, and so you have to understand the whole landscape and make sure that you're aligned with it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen technologies that were presented that depended on doctors prescribing something or doing a certain activity, but then they said, you know, the best thing about our technology is now the doctor will have to see that patient only once a year instead of once a month. And the whole incentive was for the doctor to be seeing these patients once a month, and that's what their payment depended on. So it took away the incentive for adoption in the marketplace. If there isn't much IP, if it's not relevant, if it's weak, we usually are not interested. IP is not the end-all, be-all, but it's just a way to stop the barbarians at the gate for a little while. No clear reimbursement strategy goes back to who are the potential payers. And if there's special deals for founders, and this is my favorite, one of my favorite ones, you know, if the company fails, the founders get back all the IP and everything's okay, right? So we've seen those, and it doesn't make sense. And you know, high executive pay. And my last thing is married or related partners. I know that I've gotten to multiple arguments on this one. I'm happy to get into more arguments on this one. But if you're married to your partner, if you are the son of, the son-in-law of, or brother of, the discussions you're having at work are different than the discussions that 2 business people have. And the discussion that your employees are having with you are different. And the decisions that are being made for non-necessarily business decisions. It's simply because you want Thanksgiving to be a happy holiday. It doesn't necessarily mean that the business is going to move forward properly. So if you want to apply to a group, bioangels.net, you know a lot about what we like to invest in or don't, but all of that information is on our website. And I'm taking any questions if I have time, or whatever. I don't have any time, so no more questions.
Well, no, actually, that's a good point. That's a good point to move on. So, Yaniv, have a seat, and let's bring up our last panel. So we only have about 23 minutes left, or 25, before we have to vacate the stage, so this could be a quickie. And I want you guys to tweet your questions to ask the VC, ask the angels, ask the strategics. So if we can get John Gordon, speaking of strategics, Bruce Kaufman is going to take my spot and moderate the panel. So you have a seat. You can do it from a seat. So, hello, welcome, John.
Here we are.
How you doing? Good to see you. So John Gordon actually stood up at a meetup, what was it, 4 years ago? And he said, you know, was it?
Yeah, I think it might have been 6 years.
Might have been 6 years ago. And we were at NYU, and he said, well, we should have an event like this, but just for hospitals. And this was before hospitals are really getting involved in healthcare innovation. So now he runs NYP Ventures, okay, so strategic investors. Now they run their own programs and challenges and incubators. So really the hospitals have stepped up, and they're big, important strategic investors. Also on this panel are operational angels, guys like John Hui, who step into a company and get involved. Yaniv, you've heard a lot about, and you know what he's about. You also have Donnie Tuscan, who used to run healthcare at Edison and other places. She's also gotten strategic and operational, getting her hands dirty, getting into companies, and she's got a new role too. And where's John? John's here? Where's John?
We're missing one.
John Hui, where are you? Get off your computer. I know he's been up here a lot today, but I'm really inspired by John. Yeah, he won one of our contests this year. And that's what we do with companies that we're excited about. So we get you guys involved, and we want to hear from you lots of different ways. So speaking of us is also Midstarter Ventures, our new venture fund, where we're investing in the teams and the companies that we learn about here. We had 175 teams try to get on stage today. You saw 10 of them, 5 more tomorrow. 4 or 5 will win. There's going to be Patient Choices Awards and individual awards and things like that. So, anyway, so Bruce joined our team there as our, let's just call it adult supervision. But he's also going to run this little panel here. So take it away, Bruce. We have to be off the stage by 4.
We'll work on it.
Well,
Hi, I'm Bruce Kaufman. My background is I'm a CPA, MBA. I spent my life working on raising capital or working with emerging growth businesses, including time at Rothschild Venture Capitals and Lehman Brothers. Today we're going to walk across a panel that has a wide breadth of experience in working with early stage companies in life sciences. And I thought we might start by walking across the panel and talking about who we are and what interests us most in the early life science space. Yaniv?
Okay, so our group invests exclusively in life science and therapeutics, devices, and diagnostics. We do not invest in anything other than that, usually.
So we're the exact opposite. New York Presbyterian is a large hospital system, and we're a strategic investment fund. And so when we look at where we can add value, we're really interested in engaging with the companies and creating this virtuous circle where we provide them insights that help them refine their products, which ultimately offer us a better, whether it's better quality of care, experience of care for our patients and clinicians. And we feel with within life sciences, there's too much binary risk in that, that we can't really, it's not really something a hospital can do to make a molecule work or not work. That's basic science that's not really within our purview. So we look at more digital health applications.
I'm not currently with an investment firm, so.
My name is John Hui. I'm a serial healthcare entrepreneur and also angel investor myself. I invest individually, and I belong to a couple of groups, Life Science Angel Network in New York City and Life Science Angels in the Bay Area. My latest portfolio focus on healthcare IT services. I also invest in some medical device companies and diagnostic companies.
Okay, I guess from that, we might walk through the life cycle of a new investment opportunity and talk about how do you prefer to be approached by a potential investment company, and how can they find out people like you who are interested in their specific vector, their space?
So, unlike most groups, we ask people not to contact us directly. There are a lot of groups that want a warm introduction. All of our investors have day jobs. So we ask people to go to our website, review our application criteria, and if you think that you fit those criteria, send us an application. We have monthly screening calls where we review in depth every application, and then about 23% of those are invited to present.
So from our side, we're working on our website. So the website itself is going to lay out our priority areas, what we're calling digital health, which is telehealth, which is where we made our first investment a couple of weeks ago. Digital access, search and scheduling, digital hospital tools that improve efficiency or effectiveness of care, and then we're also finally looking at machine intelligence. So we want to make sure, one, it falls within those areas because they need to fit into the strategic priorities of the organization, but at the same time, we also want to make sure, there's a couple things I look for when people approach me. For starters, don't tell me that you're just changing the world and you're disrupting healthcare, or I've got a great patient engagement. Tell me what the hell you do, for God's sakes. If you put in a pitch, if you send me a pitch and it doesn't explain what you actually do, I'm not even going to bother to look at it because you're not capable of articulating your value proposition. Same thing is, don't be too cute. Oh, we're in stealth mode. There's nothing new under the sun. It's whether you can execute. So don't, it's like I can't tell you anything about it until we have an NDA, or I can't disclose that information. I've met very well-funded venture companies with big-name VCs, and I've gone back to the VCs afterwards. I'm like, these guys don't know how to communicate. And if I want to know how credible you are, and you're like, well, I can't tell you how many uses we've had of our product until we have an NDA, it's not worth my time to go through my legal department to just get that number from you. So I want someone who's going to be honest, direct, upfront, and say, here's what we do, here's how we understand your organization. And I don't expect you to know us perfectly, but you should understand what we're doing, why we're doing it. We just had some news articles out. They explain, a little Googling will get you there. And just show that you actually put in the time and the understanding to just say, hey, look, I understand your business. I understand here's what I do, and here's how we fit together. Because ultimately, if you can't do that, you're not going to be able to sell to anyone. It's not about feeding my ego. It's about seeing whether you're good enough to understand how you're going to sell your product ultimately. Because if you can't sell your business, you can't sell the stuff that you sell either.
I would just second that notion that you need to do the research up front. Really checking that website. There isn't a firm out there that doesn't say what their investment thesis is, so make sure that you've already made that match. And I think a lot of organizations don't look at the portfolio companies. You should, not only do you need to know that you fit in the box, but you should look at the portfolio companies. Are they already invested in a competitor? They're probably not going to invest in you. So make sure that you've kind of gone through that review. And then also to second your point here, you need to have a quick, concise story. So lots of entrepreneurs focus on features and functions. We want to hear about features and functions. We want to hear, this is the problem I solve, this is how I solve it, and this is why I'm different. And those are the core. So if you can tell that in a story that's repeatable, you're already halfway in the door.
Yeah, I would add for groups, I think to come to events like this would be very helpful. You try to talk to some of the potential speakers. You do need to have a very good story. And as an individual angel, I really look at the team. From the idea side, you kind of like, unfortunately now these days, you don't hear a lot of really novel ideas that you haven't heard of, like in the general category. So you need to be able to quickly differentiate yourself, how you are different. For example, I've heard just, if you say, I'm just trying to come up with an app to manage lifestyles or diabetes, these ideas unfortunately have been flooded in the marketplace. You need to be, if you are in one of these competitive categories, you need to quickly differentiate yourself, say, this is why I'm different. The other thing is really where you can bring credibilities before you have money is the team. Although some people may say, okay, if I don't raise a fund, how can I recruit the best team? But if your idea doesn't excite some of the top talents in the beginning to go out to wild investors, people are just not going to believe in you. So I think it's very important for you to at least build a team. They can be on part-time initially and try to say that I'm trying to raise money to bring everyone full-time. That's doable, but it's very important to establish some initial credibility. Or you have some pilots, even though they're free, right? But if that shows some hospitals or healthcare organizations are willing to try your service initially.
Awesome. Now, we've seen a lot of great companies today pitching their wares and their new applications and their solutions. Any favorites stand out for any of you?
I wasn't here for the pitches, sorry.
Okay.
Apologies, I had meetings earlier.
I'm forgetting the name, which is bad.
Okay.
It was the for the diabetes with
The ocular
glucosite.
Glucosite.
Thank you. Glucosite. Thank you. I apologize, but glucosite. I will tell you that I already passed it on to a VC. So I do think it is very, very interesting technology.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was caught up on a bunch of work also, but I think the one entrepreneur that impressed me was Daniel sitting in the audience, his company Naimi, or if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. So I think his company, not only offers a pretty novel solution, but also just as the entrepreneur team that I've talked to so far has been pretty impressive.
Actually, the one thing I'll say is I saw your presentation on tonguenacity. I've been in the durable medical equipment business before, and I think there's a lot of companies out there trying to sort of create these things. Obviously, it's not a huge market for these sorts of things, but the neat thing is, devices like the iPhone and things like that have enabled a huge explosion of accessibility, and I like that that you're pushing it. I think there's an opportunity there. I think the challenge is it doesn't have the scale that a lot of these other things have. So how do you do it in an efficient and effective way? Yeah.
So, well, actually, I have a question from Twitter. This is from Miami, from Daniel Rothman, and he tweets to Medmo16 #VC. What IRR or return ratio are you hoping to achieve when you negotiate terms with a startup? A relevant question for you, Daniel, I imagine at this point. Anybody want to take that?
I think everybody goes in with a hope that you can make a 10x, simply because many won't.
Okay.
But
Over what time period? You mean 10x per year?
no. You hope that the investment that you make will return to you about 10 times within 5 to 7
4 or
years.
5 years? Okay. That's reasonable. IRR is internal rate of return. It's sort of this fudgy number that VCs use to figure out what your return on investment is.
I mean, we don't actually look for an IRR number. It's what we look for is that strategic value of the organization. So, for instance, the investment we made with Avizia, which is a telehealth company, we already use their hardware in our emergency rooms to connect our academic facilities to our community hospitals. And we see an opportunity to work with them to improve the way that works, bring more specialists to bear, bring that academic knowledge, project it even further into the community. And we see a huge opportunity there, and we think if we do it well, we should ultimately, hopefully, get a financial return from that too. But given the sort of scope of the fund in the context of the large organization, it's not as important that we double or triple the fund over 7 years.
I just think that lends again to who are you dealing with. Every deal is different, and every fund is looking for a different expectation depending on what their limited partners' expectations are in the VC world.
Yeah, I think for disciplined angel investor, the recommendation is like 30 times in order to average out the winners and losers. Some angel groups say 20 times. In reality, it's pretty difficult to measure. The reason being is that the numbers can be all made by entrepreneurs, right? It's very difficult for angel C-stage investor to have a perfect understanding of your business model. So personally, I really look at a combination of the business, the competitiveness in the category, and also most importantly is the team. So I think it's you really have to talk to various investors. You will find out that angel groups in general, they tend to buy based on passion more than the actual hard numbers, which at early stage, before you have a lot of traction, that's really the way to go.
The only thing I would add is we don't take the entrepreneurs' numbers too seriously. We like to run our own numbers, and if we believe it's the right market and if we believe that the opportunity is there, then we'll pursue it.
I think the other piece of advice is you should run your own models, what the really low end is, and how good the low end has to be for somebody, for an investor, and then the high end. And make sure that somewhere in the middle there, you're going to get to the return that they're looking for.
So a question for you folks. I'm also an angel investor, so I agree. Three-legged stool. Market, solution, team is what you need. You got your 5-year projected P&L. Everything looks good, but let's talk about a problem that some of the inventors in this room have, and how would you recommend solving it? So I've got everything all set. I'm all ready to go, but the number one thing in the medical environment is I've got to get through an IRB, and I've got to get through my early stage clinical fund for everybody to take me seriously. We all have the same problem when you have a medical device. So how do we fix the problem in the market where anybody doing medical research needs to get through that first knothole, that first early stage trial with 30 people, and it's going to cost money, it's going to cost time. You go around and you talk to all the universities, and yeah, you can get quotes for protocols ranging from $1 million to $85,000. But every medical device company in this room's got that same first knothole to get through before they're validated. How do we solve that problem in the industry?
Can I take that one? So obviously my answer is show visible traction in an online crowdfunding platform like MedStarter. Okay, now...
Supposedly the 21st Century Cures Act is going to pass next week. There is money for changing some of the stuff going on in the FDA that may end up streamlining. I got to read through the bill in more detail. That may help. Some of this goes back to the things, like John was talking about, is do you have the right team that people are going to just have the faith in you guys? No, I mean, you got to have someone who's willing to buy into the team to give you the money to pay for all the things that you need to do. It's always a chicken and egg problem. I've been an entrepreneur. I had hair once too, you know.
The other thing is, if you really believe your idea, you have to ask your friends and family and take some loans, take some risk. Yeah. Yeah, the SIBR, those kind of things. I mean, there's no magic bullet, right? I mean, when I was raising money for Triage, which I run some of the groups, I asked them later on, why did you guys invest in Triage? Was that the idea of the team? They actually said, because you put most of the money in. You know, we look at the entrepreneurs who really has deep skin in the game. At the early days, that's what you need to do.
So I think that there are more ways than you think necessarily to raise money. You can go to foundations. I mean, first of all, the SBIR and other grants is a great way to do it. You can go to foundations and find specific target populations where people are willing to give you grants. There are many, many grants in many different areas to do that. You talked about already the friends and family. There are places where the companies that might acquire you or who would partner with you see value early on. And there are many different one of those. And so it's worthwhile for you to find who they are and to talk to them early. We talk to farmers. We bring them in to make presentations to us to tell us what they buy early so that we know when companies tell us that they're likely to exit early in a specific field if it's true or not. So there's always, if you have something truly exciting, there will be somebody who has an interest in getting it in the market, whether it's a patient advocacy group or otherwise, and you have to look for it. And I think finding it is part of the proof that you have a good management team.
The other things, I hate to say this, I'm going to switch more to my entrepreneur role. I think in general the market is well capitalized, that there's more money chasing the right deals. So if you have a hard time to get attraction, no matter how passionate you feel about it, especially in the the pharmaceutical space, typically it's either the category is not one of the strategic focus right now, or maybe it's too crowded. Because if you really, the deal is as good as you describe, it will be hard for people not to realize that if you talk to the right amount of people.
Sure.
Sure.
Why don't you?
Just for the television audience, what was your question?
That's way too difficult.
I think if I could paraphrase it, how do you cut through the clutter? How do you quickly get yourself, or at least continuously get yourself through all of the different levels you need to jump through to talk to not just finding an angel, but getting through to the angel fund, getting through to the angel fund's advisors to continually represent your story. And I think part of that is the quality of the materials that you create or that are created with you and your team.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that not everything requires venture funding. I think that's, it's this sort of hamster wheel we all get caught up on. Is it's an idea, it's healthcare, and therefore I must go out and get venture funding and things like that. And there's actually some really great blogs that I can't for the life of me remember at the moment, but to talk about the dangers of taking venture funding. Because to be perfectly honest, once you get in, and I'm not going to talk about what we're doing because it's slightly different, but when you get a financial investor on board, and it's less so for angels, but it's still important for angels, but particularly professional investors, when they come on board, their goal is not to make sure you succeed. Their goal is to make money. If you succeed, that's a bonus. But there are ways that you can fail and they can still make money. So, it's going to change. It will change the direction of the company. And if what's most important to you is you're passionate about what your idea is, what your product is, and things like that, I think it's important to reconsider whether venture investment is the right way to go, or instead look at other sources of funding that allow you to realize your idea, maybe not scale it as fast, but build a business around the passion and be true to yourself.
I think the reality is that 95% of the angel sources are not a match for you, or not specifically, I don't know who you are. But what was said here before is make sure you know who your investors are. Because if you're just sending out hundreds of applications to people who don't invest in your area, you're wasting your time. You're better off figuring out who has your type of opportunity within their focus, and figure out how they want to be approached, and then going after them. So making a few qualified, good approaches as opposed to blanketing everybody. When I see blanket stuff, I don't even respond to it. So those are the major things. And to one more point, when our group invests in a company, now we jump to the other side. Now we have the company's interest in succeeding. We don't have the ability to replace the CEO. We don't have a stable of CEOs outside. So we are betting on you, and we want to make sure that you're successful, and we'll jump in multiple ways to help you reach that success.
You know, I want to say you want to understand what investors really care about, to John's point. So maybe read a book about angel investors. You know, there's a good one. I think David Ross' Angel Investing is a pretty good one. Spend like $25, spend a whole day to read through what investors really care about, right? So you can talk about the right language, how you can insure them with, reduce the perceived risk of your business. Another thing, I hate to go back to the team side, you need to really find a rainmaker on your team, right? If you don't have someone who can convince investors to invest in you, then it will be hard for other customers to buy your products or services. So it's really important to get someone who's good at this on your team.
I think we have time for one last question.
We actually have a little time if
Okay.
you guys. So just so everybody knows, we have to leave this place by 4:30. We're probably going to go to a bar down the street called Houston's. But anyway, so we have to be out of this room by 4:30. So we can talk on the stage for another 10 minutes. But if you have to get your coat or whatever, that's fine. But I want to keep going on this conversation. Anybody else? Still interesting, right? Okay. You guys have a lot of stamina. Okay, go on.
Was there more from the Twitter feed?
No, nothing.
Okay,
Nothing
so
interesting.
what I have a question for each of you is, if you think about what is the last deal that you pulled the trigger on, what was it that pushed you over the line on that deal?
So for us, the last few deals that we pulled the trigger on, they were very early on, and which is why we didn't give a lot of money, but we believed in the management team, and we thought that these folks wouldn't spend their time on something unless it was worthwhile. And we thought the science was very good, but very early, obviously, it still needs to prove itself. But we thought that with that quality of management team, if this science works, it's going to be great.
So in our case with Avizio, we looked at, this was a product we were already using in our organization, and actually it came out of a complete coincidence. Literally, was introduced to one VC, and turns out he lost the deal and then came back a couple weeks later and said, "We got it." Literally, I think it was in a gym on an exercise bike, and I answered the phone for some strange reason. And we realized that, one, it was a product we already had in-house, so we knew the product. Our teams knew the product. We're a 245-year-old hospital, so the idea of simply jumping into this is a little uncomfortable for all of us. So one is, we knew the product, we'd seen it, we'd used it, we trusted it. They also had a decent, this was a little bit more of a growth equity investment, and I think for us, our first investment to have something with a little bit more meat on it, I think was attractive for the organization, a little bit more risk mitigation, if you will, because they're still a hardware business, even though they're growing the software side. And then meeting with the management team, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but it's more than just, management team isn't just like, okay, I worked at Google and I'm a full stack engineer, and it's like 17 sort of little check boxes you can check. It's much more than that. It's when you talk to the management team, do they come across as credible that they not only understand the product, they understand the space, they understand their weaknesses. That's something that people really miss a lot is I want a management team that comes in and say, hey, we got all this stuff, but you know what we really need help on is here. And we think you guys are a good fit for that standpoint. And this was a great example of that. We're growing the software side. We'd love your feedback. You've already been a great customer, but we'd love your feedback as we continually evolve this. And I think a lot of times, entrepreneurs and CEOs are very loath to say that they have any flaws whatsoever. It's like when you ask someone, who's your competition? Oh, nobody. Well, that's an instant, warning right there. It's clearly you don't understand your market. Same thing if, you have no weaknesses. I don't want to work with you because you're never going to listen to anything I say. Not that I have a monopoly on the truth either, but someone you can work with and who's going to have this back and forth where ultimately you're creating positive value on both sides. I think that's really important.
I'm just going to add to that. The other is that when you hear a potential investment tell you that they walked away from a deal, when they said, I had a customer who was going to be a great deal, but it's not really in our focus, it's not in our niche, and even though we could have made money, we told them no. I personally love that. It means you know that what your focus is, you could move, you're not going to pivot, you're going to stay focused. Now, sometimes you need to pivot, but somebody who understands their niche clearly is definitely a positive when you're looking at companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. My last deal is also a Vizia. So John didn't know this story, but I'm actually the one who introduced the Sam Zenzek to Peter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was not a good outcome for me because after NYP and Northwell invested, they were trying to negotiate down on some of the individual angels, so it was a bad deal for me.
So you got to blame Sam. He led that one. It wasn't us. We were following.
Right. After I made a wonderful introduction, but anyway, from Vizio as a company, they are in the telemedicine space. They're already generating at the time they were raising about $17 million in revenue and 250 hospitals. So to me, it's a crowded area, but it's a safe play because the fact that we know there were going to be more consolidation in the telemedicine space, it's unlikely that company will, go, to a bad direction, and more likely maybe under intensive competition, some of the larger companies like Imwell, Teladoc, or some others may come in to do an acquisition. So I look at this as with a less kind of like multiples on the potential return side, but as a safety bet. But from the entrepreneurs in the audience, I think it's very important for you to have your niche, whether you're the first mover advantage, or you have a unique, unfair competitive advantage, or something, or you can say this is what we have. This is how you can reduce your risk, right? As an investor, we'll look at it, we try to build a nest of the portfolio. Some of them are more aggressive, some of them are more conservative, so it's very important for you to deliver the message out. That's very important.
Awesome. Do we have any more? Sorry.
So there was one.
I was pointing.
Okay. Bruce. Don't.
Don't jump off the stage.
Now, the rule is when you ask a question, you have to state your name and what company you're with and what you do there. It's got to switch.
There we go. It's Richard Park.
See, I knew that. I wanted to say that.
And
Thank you, Richard.
I'm with CityMD. So thank you. It's a wonderful panel. My question is, versus a later stage company versus an earlier stage company, what makes a good management team? Is it different?
Are you asking if there's a difference between a good late stage versus a good early stage company?
Right,
Management team?
Right. Everyone's saying a management team is really important. What makes a good management team for an early stage company? Is that any different from a later stage company?
Are you worried about your job?
So Rich Park is the CEO of CityMD, which has, 53 locations now? 60. Now, I saw Rich Park with my daughter when he was a physician at StatMD up the street from me. What was that, in 2007, something like that? So they've grown fabulously. So Yaniv's question is a relevant one, I guess. Take it away, guys.
I do agree that sometimes the different stages of companies sometimes require different types of entrepreneurs. but fundamentally their personality, whether you can trust them and they inspire you, is something that carries throughout any stage of investment.
You know, I think it depends. Like early on, you definitely need the passion, the desire, the willingness to just deal with that angst and anxiety and stress and just push through despite everything and every indication saying no. And that passion to see an idea through and the flexibility also sort of to grow through it. You know, I had a professor in business school talk about sort of the growth curve of a business, and it wasn't sort of this straight, you know, nice curve, but it had these like little inflection points, like little wiggles along the way. And he gave a great example. He did a business school case on, I think it was like the company that came up with Cutco knives and stuff like that. It was one of those TV marketing companies. And the company grew to $150 million in revenue, and everyone still reported directly to the CEO. And there were literally lines at his door because the guy didn't know anything about managing a large business. And I think when you get to a certain point in an organization, I'm sure you've seen this given your guys' scale, you need to start systematizing things. And some entrepreneurs are able to make that transition and start saying, hey, you know what? Turns out I actually need HR now, and I need to recognize that I need to actually have hiring policies, and we can't just say, you know, just act like however the heck we want to act because we have 150 people here. And various other things. Honestly, you know, when companies get bigger, the early employees are going to feel that passion, and then once you get up to a certain size, it's just going to be a job for folks because there's not enough equity, there's not enough money on the table. And so you need someone who can transition from just getting everyone sort of, taking 3 people and getting them really excited and selling a vision to everyone to actually managing a business. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO. That could be a great COO or something like that. But those things definitely often will change.
I would just say that I think a lot of CEOs inherently know whether they can make it to the next stage. You definitely have to have passion and tenacity in the early part, and you can get behind that management team or that CEO who can do that. But at some point, you can watch CEOs who go, this is just too much. I don't think I can handle this. And they're open. Some of them are very open. Those that are honest and can be open to the fact that I'm not the guy to take it to the next stage, but boy, I want to see my company succeed. So the best thing for the company is that I bring in somebody who can take it to the next stage. And then I've seen CEOs who've first time all the way to IPO, and that's because they wanted to do that, they wanted to stay in, and they had the tenacity to do that. So I think most CEOs inherently know, hopefully, from an investor standpoint, you have one that's honest enough with himself and with you to be able to support or, support whichever way he wants to go.
I feel this is like a quiz from Dr. Park, since you built such a bigger business than most of the people on the stage. I think from my perspective, the early stage company, you're looking for entrepreneurs with kind of tenacity who can act as jack of all trades, who can really work hard and late, put their sweat and blood into the business. I think as the company gets mature, like there's a saying that the C company really relies on people, the B company relies on system, the A company relies on culture, right? You're looking for someone who can come in and really build a culture. So let's say one of the key players gets sick or step down from the business has a continuity. I think you've built a wonderful business with 60 franchise, locations out there. I mean, there's a way to replicate the system. This is what late-stage investors are looking at is what if the original team is no longer there? Can the business continuously to be sustainable? And early-stage companies, the company's culture try to be built around the entrepreneur's own personality, and I think this has to move away also. And also, obviously, you look at a sizable business, you're looking at executives who can really bring in a diverse scales to scale it up, the operation.
Okay, so that is a great last question to end on. I just want to thank everybody for coming today. We're going to start tomorrow again, bright and early. Thank you, Dr. Park, for closing us out with a great question. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Health Tech Talk Live, for live streaming this whole thing. Thank you, everybody who tweeted. Thanks to all of our people, Tom Tagarillo, Mimi Rosenfeld, Donna Cusano, Sharad Mishra, Bruce Kaufman. Oh, and thank me too. But just pay me, okay? So anyway, after this, we're going to go to a bar called Houston's, which is if you go up Varick Street 3 blocks on Houston Street, it's right there. And then there's no after party per se, but it looks like a nice place. Sharad checked it out the other day. It's only opening at 4, so it should be pretty much ours for the first hour or two. So anybody wants to join us there, I'll be there like in half an hour after we clean this place up. And thank you for coming.